Well, local food systems for us is basically the beef side of it, since that's our product. And we have noticed a lot of interest in it. We wean our calves in the spring, April, May timeframe. And now we've had more customers come to us and want to buy directly off the farm, the steers. And just recently, on this last group that we weaned, I've taken 8 steers to one customer, and they will raise them till they're sized to butcher. And then I took another 8 steers, and we're getting a lot of interest from local people, taking them, raising them up to the size to slaughter, and then processing them for their families and stuff, instead of taking them to an auction barn where they may stay in state and they may actually go out of state. Well, I think the key word that you hear a lot in the public sector is sustainability. I think what we're doing with the environment, what we're doing with our production goals, trying to always increase our food production to meet the demand, I think it makes us really sensitive because of the practices that we put in, the environmental practices we put in of rotating and fertilizing to soil tests and all that. My father would run 60 mama cows, and we're up to 90 mama cows. So that's a significant increase in just one generation, say 30 years, of 50% increase to do that. So I think it's important to be able to continue that, finding ways to produce more and minimize your footprint on the environment. And I think NRCS and MU Extension are two of the big partners, or the two of the big catalysts for trying to do that.
If we don't take care of what we have today, honestly, it won't matter what Wiles wants to do with it in the future. So I think all these little changes that my father and his generation as a whole shows you how adaptive and flexible agriculture can be, and how modern it is. And I think the challenge is just to inform the public of these steps that my dad and other farmers are taking every single day. No one wants this land to be taken care of more than the people that live on it.
Good morning again, and we welcome you to this Producers Roundtable. We're excited about this new opportunity, and I do want to thank our moderator, who will be joining us in just a moment. I'll introduce him, but Garret Hawkins and I had this conversation probably 6 months ago, Garret, and went back and forth a little bit, and actually I'll give him credit. He said, I've got an idea about how to bring these producers together that I think will work, and so I'm excited about it. I think it's going to bring a lot of richness to the conversation, and we want you to be thinking about questions that you may have, because you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions as we go forward. So let me give you a brief introduction on Garret Hawkins. I have known him since I got here, one of the first people I met after coming to the state. He was in a different role then, and I have different roles now too, so I guess we both have changed a little bit. But he was elected as Farm Bureau President in 2020. And just has done a terrific job in moving forward with Farm Bureau in this state, not only known in Missouri, but also quickly known around the country. I know I work with colleagues and friends that are in Farm Bureau around the U.S., and certainly a lot of people know Garret and are appreciative of his leadership and what he's doing, not only in the state of Missouri, but around the country with public policy and all kinds of things at the federal level. He has a bachelor's degree from Missouri State University. You'll notice that's the second time in this program that I've said Missouri State, and I haven't lost anything out of it. We had a great faculty member with us yesterday on stage, and so we appreciate Missouri State and the great agricultural work they do to complement and work with us as partners, and we certainly are glad they gave us Garret as a state leader in Farm Bureau. And from 2017 to 2019, he served as Deputy Director of Missouri Department of Agriculture, working to protect and promote the state's vital industry. He also led Farm Bureau's national lobbying efforts for nearly 15 years. So when it comes to the federal level in particular, great expertise that Garret brings. He's a beef cattle farmer, and I know he's a great husband and a wonderful dad too. I got a chance to meet his family this year at the state fair when he was recognized as the farm family for the county. So exciting to see him standing beside me giving out awards, and then suddenly he had to pivot and be a dad and a husband, and we're really glad to be a part of that. He's from Appleton City in St. Clair County. You will note in a few moments he'll introduce the panelists, but I want you to give a warm MU Extension welcome to my friend Garret Hawkins.
Well, thank you, Dr. Stewart. Thank you, Allison, and the entire Extension team. It is so good to be here, to be a part of Extension Engagement Week. How exciting it is that you all are celebrating food, all things food, and certainly when Dr. Stewart reached out several months ago to explore this idea, we were all on board to figure out how we can participate and be a part of this week and truly lift up our partners in Extension who have been our partners in the very beginning since 1915 when Farm Bureau was founded. You know, as Marshall and I explored this topic, you know, yesterday you all heard about value-added agriculture and why Missouri is the place to be, I think, nationwide when you look at what's happening today in agriculture and the suite of policies and people that are in place to move this state forward. But this panel, we're truly going to focus on the farmer's perspective of what's happening in the landscape today. And just the other day, I had the chance to interact with our collegiate Farm Bureau members. Missouri Farm Bureau has chapters all across the state. We just added chapters at Ozarks Technical College as well as Lincoln University this fall. And one of the members asked me, how do I answer the question that you've got to be in big ag to be a Farm Bureau member? And maybe you've heard that before as well. Well, Missouri Farm Bureau, we closed out our membership year, 147,000 member families all across this state. We have a physical footprint in every county, and truly our organization represents the diversity of agriculture, and the panelists that we've assembled today will reinforce that with the diversity of production as well as thoughts and opinions that you're going to hear this morning. So we deliberately wanted to make it just a little bit spicy for you with some of the topics that we're going to cover, and certainly for those of you here as well as those of you who are tuning in online, we want to make sure and save time for your questions. So, you know, I had the chance to be on radio the other day in the St. Louis area, and I was asked, we were recapping the recent victory in the special legislative session, the extension or renewal for 6 years of important ag tax credits. And they asked, well, what else are farmers talking about? Well, we're talking about input prices. We're talking about failed energy policy at the national level. We're talking about food prices, just like all of you as consumers. We're talking about drought, and fortunately, we're starting to get some precipitation, but we're talking about all these things that impact our pocketbooks and our ability to continue to produce. And so we're going to span some really important topics this morning, topics that you're probably hearing from your farm and ranch families in your communities. So again, make sure you're jotting down questions so that we can get to those. And with that, you know, I could read the bios of our distinguished panel, but I think it's best if you hear it directly from them. And again, you will appreciate the diversity that's represented here on stage. So I'm going to start with Miss Lorin Fahrmeier, if you'd give an introduction.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So good to see a lot of friendly faces. My name is Lorin Fahrmeier from Lexington, Missouri. My husband Brett and I, along with our family, we have a mid-size specialty crop farm where we have you-pick strawberries, blackberries, and are currently in pumpkin season. We also have a few acres of row crop and raise purebred shorthorn cattle where we butcher and sell the frozen meat through our market on our farm, along with purebred Berkshire pork. So we are, you know, like I said, that mid-size, consumer-driven, direct-to-consumer type business model. So glad to be here today.
To my immediate right, Todd Hayes serves as Missouri Farm Bureau Vice President, longtime friend of mine and someone that I respect for his involvement in production agriculture. And he's been the world traveler here recently in terms of being in D.C., and we're going to talk a little bit about that later in the program. But Todd, tell us about your farming operation.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett, and I too as well. I'm excited to be here. It's glad to see so many people. And so I live in Monroe City, Missouri, northeast Missouri. My wife and I have 37 years. Roseanne have a couple of kids that are involved in our family operation, along with her brother and her mother. We consist of a farrow to finish swine operation. We're still an independent producer, meaning that we own it all. We have all the risk. And also we have a corn and soybean farms as well. We rent some farms and own some of our own, but we're able to produce all the corn we need for our farm, and some years we'll have extra that we'll sell, but typically all our grain is gone to our own feed for the animals, and all our animals are indoors and never outside. I grew up on a farm where all the pigs were outside and gradually moved them indoors in the 70s and in the 80s and continued that, so we see the benefits of that. So I'll talk more about that later or answer questions about confinement operation in the swine industry. I'm glad to be here.
To my immediate left, Mr. Chris Brundick from Marys County.
Thank you, Garrett. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that good? Okay, so my name is Chris Brundick, and I'm from Argyle, Missouri, which is southern Osage County. Along with my son, we farm in Osage and Marys County. We raise pork and beef and have row crops. And in 2019, the fall of 2019, we took our operation one step farther, and we built a meat processing facility in Vienna, Missouri, where we currently slaughter 1,500 head of beef and pork annually. So this is a new experience. It is a state inspected facility, and we do custom work as well. Thank you.
And finally, Mr. Austin Stanton here from Boone County.
Thank you. I thought I hit a button on the mic for a second. I'm Austin Stanton. I'm from Centralia, Missouri, or in Boone County here. And I come from a very traditional farm. We have row crop. We also have hay, cattle. And then my brother and I, we decided to go a little off, and we got chickens. And so we actually do everything from raising the feed to selling the eggs to the consumer. We're very vertically integrated. We also have some turkeys, some sheep, and some pigs that we sell as well.
All right, so hopefully you're seeing and hearing what I tried to describe. We've got a great diversity of production represented here, and we're going to start with, we're kind of nearing the end of the first quarter of the school year. All of us have kids or grandkids in school, I guess, except Austin. I hear often about school breakfast, school lunch, and clearly, if we think about the last decade, lots of conversations about how we can get more Missouri-grown product into schools. Lorin, you've got a little experience about that. How is the effort going here in the state to get more locally grown food into our schools?
So what I've noticed on our farm, and I worked with Extension for years and years, and it seems like there's always an ebb and flow. In my opinion, and this is through lived experience, it's October, it's National Farm to School Month, which is really exciting because it's a time to highlight locally produced foods across the United States. One of the challenges, though, is, in order to get healthy and nutritious foods on school lunch plates, local food oftentimes is only sexy when it's convenient. How easy can it be to get local food on the school lunch plate? And that's one of the things that we have noticed, that it goes hot and cold. And one of the production problems is we can have high tunnels, we can have all of those things, but from a school perspective, not every kitchen in a school across the state of Missouri is the same. The skill set of the employees across the state of Missouri is not the same. And so it's exciting to do apples in the fall or tomatoes, cherry tomatoes on salad bars and things like that, but trying to figure out a way that it can be truly economically viable for producers to have that sustainable supply into schools. That's been one of the biggest challenges that we have noticed for years now. We would, like I mentioned, we'd take 2 steps forward and then about 5 steps backwards, because there's always there's turnover of employees, there's turnover of, school administrators, and where local food falls on the list of priorities oftentimes changes according to who is in charge. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we find as well. Then you have food safety barriers. There's tons of regulations. We talk a lot about regulations. There's tons of regulations from a local food, grower's perspective that we have to keep up with, and sometimes it doesn't make sense for our bottom line to sell in that wholesale capacity, because we could hire a single person just to keep up with, field inspections, produce inspections, things like that across the board. That becomes cumbersome, and it turns farmers into so much more than just folks who can grow a high quality product.
Okay, well that's a really interesting perspective firsthand as you have experienced it. So Todd, we're going to jump right into and kind of hit the elephant in the room, and that's kind of long-held misperceptions about large-scale animal agriculture. I mean, let's face it, folks, we've had this conversation in the state and around the country for many, many years. And you've been an advocate because you know firsthand in terms of how your farm operation has evolved with the times to improve animal care and ultimately production and the end product. So can you tell our audience, Todd, how the pork industry has evolved over the years and to be more efficient, utilizing fewer resources? What has been your experience? What do you want folks to know?
Well, it's a lifelong, growing up on a farm where pigs were always there, and outdoor pigs, and then eventually inside. Some of the biggest things I think I can take away from, I can hopefully tell you, is by having the pigs indoors, we're doing several things, one of which we're able to control the environment the pigs are in, keep them comfortable, keep them warm, or keep them cool, whatever need to be, maintaining that. Another thing is we're able to help keep diseases out, so the pigs aren't around the birds, the rodents, and things like that, so we don't have the issues of that. We're not having to use wormers. We're not having to use certain things in our pigs anymore because of being indoors. We've eliminated some of those things. Another takeaway is the productivity has gone up so much because we can help the environment and care for the animals better. Each one's in its own area, own space. It's not getting picked on by another animal. We can talk about that maybe a little bit later, but another takeaway is I think environmentally we've made so many great strides when we put our pigs indoors. Used to be when they were outdoors, every time it rained, we knew where the lots got cleaned off after heavy rain. We knew where that went. Now we're able to contain that in either a storage facility, either a lagoon or a pit under the barn or a slurry store. There's different systems, but then able to take that and utilize that as nutrients on our farms. There's value in that, and then as the price of fertilizer we all know has almost doubled in the last year, that manure is still there. And so we're able to be more efficient and keep our costs down on our row crops on those farms we can apply, but we're not going to over apply. We want to try to get over as many acres as we can based on the nutrient content of that manure and based on our soil tests that we're doing. So I think we're definitely helping with the environment. We're also using less corn to put on a pound, less feed to put on a pound of pork. We've dramatically decreased that in the last 10 to 15 years by over 20-25%. So that's a huge saving, not only for us as a business, but also helps us to be more sustainable because we're not using as many resources there. So a lot of that is a big way. I think we know that we feel like it's more humane for the animals to house them the way we are. It's definitely safer for myself and my family and the workers when we're working around the animals. They're a lot more docile. They're not as apt to run over us or be as aggressive at times. So we're focused on those things, but also the health of the animal, having a veterinarian coming in once a month. We have a nutritionist that we work with, a whole team of people that are a lot smarter than me, but I know that can help us to keep moving forward. And really, Garrett, we've taken a lot of the production ideas and methods from some of the larger integrators from back in the early 90s. We're like, why can't we do that? Why can't we build? We don't have to build to that size, but we can build to that type of facility and that model. And with the help of some of the folks from the university many years ago, I don't know if Dr. Joe's still in here or not, I know he's on our farm numerous times, we talked about ventilation, we talked about water, we talked about manure handling and those things. Those are things that help us as people, part of our team, I like to say, to get to where we are, and we're still always looking to how can we improve, how can we be more efficient. We're never looking to be the largest. We just, how can we be better within our own realm that's cost effective, that's better for us, for the environment, and for the pigs, and then it's a win-win for everything. So thank you.
So Hayes Farms was reducing its carbon footprint before you knew it was cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what you were.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
All right. Chris Brundick, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, in reality, I mean, when we look at the pandemic and as we reflect all the challenges, but also the opportunities that came about, especially when Governor Parson positioned this state to move the needle when it comes to more small and medium scale meat processing capacity. You as a farmer raised your hand and said, you know what, I think I want to get into the business. And it's a tough business when you talk about meat processing. So share with our group online and here, you know, not just how you did it, but who's your target audience? How are you interacting with consumers, and what's been your experience thus far?
Well, thank you for calling me an entrepreneur, because that's a lot. Well, I wouldn't agree with that, be honest with you, because I'm a little long in the tooth and most people call me stupid. But, you know, taking this on was not an easy project. It wasn't. And yes, it was an opportunity, but we looked at it also as a necessity. We were caught in the pandemic there where we couldn't ship our pork, and there was 6, 8, almost 10-week period that 6 weeks or so that we couldn't ship whatsoever, and then probably about a 10-week overall backlog of stock that was oversized that we finally got moved through the food chain. Our pork went to Sioux Falls, and we used to be a part of a program that furnished specialty pork to Whole Foods. And the conversation led to euthanization and things such as that. And I said, we don't raise livestock to kill it. That's not what we do. And so I knew of a building that had been vacant for years, and it had coolers and freezers in it that had been built to USDA specifications years ago. It made frozen pizzas. I contacted the guy and asked him about it because I thought we were going to have to start killing things emergency, you know, giving it away if we had to, or discount it down very cheap. Well, naturally, the building had been vandalized enough that wasn't possible in the time, and there hadn't been any power to it, and the cooling didn't work. So, but the conversation continued, and we kept thinking, well, let's not ever let ourselves get caught in this position again. Let's create our own market. We saw the need. Lorin was telling earlier that they produce on their place and sell to area people, and we saw the need for that. We had that need. We had that product. And we had, through the years, been building a clientele, a base of friends, family, relatives in the cities and stuff that always got a half a beef from us, you know, freezer beef, that kind of stuff. And then that got a little bit bigger, where we were marketing quite a few every year, but always having to have another processor do it. And of course, that's where some call me not so smart, but we did build our own processing facility at that point. I don't regret it. We currently, like I said earlier, we do, you know, 1,100 a year. We call ourselves Farmers Meat Market LLC. We're located in Vienna, Missouri. We do a lot of custom work for other farmers that have their own clientele. We do have a retail setting in our place where we market outside to, your question was, who do we market to? Well, we do have a local market. We're in a very beef-rich environment. There's a lot of beef around where we are, and quite honestly, we fill up an awful lot of freezers. You know, we're doing a lot of custom work for a lot of people, so beef isn't our big seller, but we do sell a lot of pork. We have not renewed our contract. We had to cut back on our production of hogs in order to keep up with the meat market, but I'm trying to find that sweet spot of what it is that I can produce, and we still, yes, we do a lot of retail cuts, but off of my place, I sell a lot of halves and wholes, pork and beef, and that gets a lot of product out of there. Trying to find exactly where we need to be for what it is that we're going to produce, that's something we have to work through in the future, but we do use some social media, and we are on, we're in an environment where we could utilize Highway 42 lake traffic going to the Lake of the Ozarks, and that's going to be our target in the future, is trying to get some more specialty products and creating that market. That's our direction.
All right, quick audience poll. How many of you, show of hands, are products of 4-H and FFA, or one or the other? Huge number, okay? It'd be fun if we had time to go around the room as an icebreaker to see what your SAE projects were in FFA or what your 4-H projects were. And truly, Austin Stanton and his brother Dustin truly are products of youth development programs. And how cool is it to see that their enterprise, one of their enterprises today, all started with an SAE project in terms of eggs. So Austin, I'm really curious. Lessons learned that started at a young age. Now you guys are well known in this region. I mean, heck, you guys won a National Proficiency Award in FFA. So you guys are like the shining stars. But I'm curious, would you do anything different?
Well, I guess I need to start out how the whole story went. So back in the first grade, my brother had a 4-H incubation project, and it was in the classroom. And at the end of the project, someone got to take the 6 chickens home. So he put his name in the hat, and he expected to win them. No one else was wanting them until the very last day. And a girl put her name in the hat. So then there was competition. He learned at a very young age that women always win. Because he didn't win them. He came home crying and very upset because he didn't get the 6 chicks that he wanted. The very next day, our uncle bought 6 chicks for him and me, and so that began Stanton Brothers. And just to fast forward to whenever my brother got into FFA, he had to have an SAE project. Well, we have the chickens, so he thought, we'll go ahead and we'll start selling at the farmer's market, because we've already been selling to a lot of neighbors. And we went to the farmer's market. The first week we sold a half a dozen. The second week, we doubled our sales to a full dozen. So, not the best, but the third week we finally started to sell decent. We sold like 30 or 40 dozen. We thought, wow, we're doing great. And just to fast forward, at that time the market would close in the winter, so we had all these eggs, we didn't know what to do with them. Well, there was a local grocery store, Clover's, and they wanted us to start selling to them. So we sold to them, but whenever spring came around, we didn't have chickens or not enough eggs to provide for the farmer's market. So it just became a snowball effect to where it is today, where we sell to over 60 weekly outlets here in mid-Missouri. So I don't know how many things I would change of what we did, because our parents, they did a lot of help. Obviously, the feed was very affordable because our dad raised the feed for us, and that was our allowance. So it just went to feed them. There's a lot of lessons learned whenever it comes to doing business with people, and if they're not paying very well, if they're not constantly paying as they should, and then they get backlogged, and then you end up having to go to court because they didn't pay the last of the eggs. But that's part of business. You learn, you live. So I think there's a lot of lessons learned, but nothing that I would change, nothing that's hurt me or anything.
Wow. Okay, so for our 4-H specialists that are online or here, just keep that in mind. You never know with those young people that you are working with, you never know where one idea for a project could land and become a really great enterprise for those young people when they grow up. So how cool is that? Okay, Lorin, back to you. You touched on this a little bit. I mean, what I heard from you earlier is it's not really all sunshine and roses when you're in the specialty crop business, right?
It's not sunshine and roses in farming, period.
Period, yeah. So talk to us a little bit more, because I'm really intrigued when you start into talking through certain requirements that ultimately you would maybe have to hire a person to help keep up. Again, elaborate a little bit more on the challenges that you face as a specialty crop grower in trying to get direct to consumer.
Sure. So all sectors, all of us up here, we all have challenges that are unique to all of our businesses, right? So, and it's paramount that we are creating and providing a safe product for consumers across the board. But where it becomes difficult, especially from a direct consumable farm perspective, is, if we were to sell, and we used to sell in grocery store markets across the Kansas City area, we dealt with wholesalers. But as soon as, and I'm sure several of you are familiar with GAP certification and, all of these different certifications that cost thousands and thousands of dollars. There's racy apples that are on the table today. In order for them to become certified to sell to Walmart and to larger grocery chains, that's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars of change and investment that has to be made to our business for a large scale situation. So all of the certifications, and then at the end of the day, is our food really any safer just because we're checking boxes for an audit? So there's a balance there. I'm not saying it's not important, but what makes it truly safer to do that? Some of the other barriers for us, with us selling directly to consumers, we have farm safety that we have to think about constantly, whether it's with our customers that come to play at the pumpkin patch or to pick berries. So we have that layer that we have to think about. Is our farm safe to be on? We have input costs. We have our livestock, and so of course with fertilizer prices, a bag of our strawberry fertilizer last year was $30 a bag. It's now $100 a bag, and we go through 3 of those a week now. So we are really utilizing our compost and our animal fertilizer now just simply because it's out of necessity. And it's kind of one of those things of what's old is new again. We cover crop a lot because, we're kind of reverse grazing our cattle. So then, we call them independent fertilizer distributors when they're out grazing out in the fields.
Always knowing you're creative.
Always. But, and then labor costs on top of that. Again, all of us, if we have employees, labor costs are going through the roof, and there are our workers' expectations. There's just layer after layer after layer. So if you want to be in agriculture, if you want to especially do something that's direct to consumer like what we do for that experience, you have to be prepared for all of the what ifs that come your way. And it's just like Austin said, there's nothing that we would necessarily change. There's just lots of lessons learned. But you have to find your threshold and your sweet spot of what you can do for your size market versus what then becomes, economically unfeasible versus it being something that we're going to then have a healthy business to pass along to our kids, because that's the goal. It's not the goal just to pass a business, it's to pass a healthy, from a financial standpoint, business on to future generations.
I appreciate you've segued well to Todd
You're welcome.
When you ask what if, okay? What if you have a rogue state, i.e. California, that wants to dictate animal husbandry practices for the rest of the country? We're seeing that right now. And when I referenced Todd's a jet setter, he just returned from Washington, D.C., where he had listened to oral arguments before the U.S. Supreme Court, the challenge that National Pork as well as American Farm Bureau have waged against the state of California for imposing animal husbandry practices, essentially dictating animal husbandry practices for the rest of the country. So Todd, tell us a little bit about the experience. I haven't even got to hear it yet since he just got home late last night. So tell our audience about it.
I'll try to keep it short. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. My brother happened to be out there as well as the director of National Pork. But Prop 12 of California was passed in 2018. A little more background on that, and it was the voters decided that the question was, should your animals be raised in a more humane manner? And everybody, of course, they had over 60% of the voters said yes. Well, what that did was they said it allowed the state of California they were going to write rules and regs for how female pigs, veal calves were raised, and also some poultry on this amount of space they would need in the environment they were in. But to do that, it was also that was for the state of California, but then also it related to any meat that would be sold in California had to meet those requirements. So that meant that anybody, any state across the U.S. that sold pork or veal or the eggs where they were being raised had to meet their standard. And oh, by the way, it had to be, for us in a pig business, the mothers to the mothers had to be raised in that manner. So they were going to enact this in 2020, and this had to be, we were already behind by 2019 because we didn't have females that met that standard. So it was all about square footage of space they needed. It was all about what they thought would be animal welfare would be better for the animal. So American Farm Bureau and National Pork Council were looking for plaintiffs to sign on, get petitioners, producers, myself, and about 14 other people across the U.S. signed on to that. I just provided information, what we do, how we raise pigs, how this would affect us, until I got a document that said, had my name on it as a plaintiff against the state of California. And I thought, this is starting to get real now. But so they lost several cases all the way through California, knowing we would. The lawyer, I just kept up with what was going on, hoping we'd get picked up by the Supreme Court. It was last spring. So they had oral arguments yesterday, not knowing what that would be like. It's pretty amazing to have all 9 justices up there, but it was arguments. The attorney would start in on something and they would cut them short and start drilling them on questions, and somebody else would drill them on questions. So, back and forth. But at the end of it, I felt pretty positive as a producer that the justices really dug into what this was about, and one of their arguments is that it interferes with the Commerce Clause, especially the Dahmer Commerce Clause, and I'm not a lawyer, so I get over my skis real quick. But it's basically one state can't set up rules and regulations on what another state has to do. So we were arguing, to me it's very historical, not only for agriculture products, it could be almost for anything. So if they can say, you got to do this and this for your product to come to our state, what's to keep another state or California to go and say, well, you've got to pay people a certain wage, or you got to use a certain type of electric vehicle or a non-combustible engine to produce this or this before it can be sold in our state. So we feel like this has overwhelming reaching arms at some point. So we're hoping we could set a precedence here that, hey, you can't be doing that. They were arguing quite a bit on morality, saying, the folks in California, their morals are animal welfare. We want to be morally treat our animals better. And the Chief Justice questioned their lawyer quite a bit and said, okay, you're saying that's what California voters wanted because it's their morals, their moral values. Well, let's say the state of North Carolina, for example, their moral values is we want to have enough food and affordable food for the people that's below the poverty level. So we're going to make sure we impose rules that we meet our moral values. He said, then we're going to have conflicting moral values all over the U.S., have different rules from so many different states. We cannot have that. So the takeaway, we felt positive. We won't know their decision until in the spring, but hopefully we asked them to throw it out, just to do away with the whole Prop 12. They may do that. They may send it back to the state of California, strip some things out, and ask for certain things have to be done. So we may be still in court down the road. But it was pretty impactful to be there with a handful of other producers, knowing that it's just not for me and my farm, but it's for so many and so many in the future. It was very impactful, and so no, I think hopefully we'll be prevailing that. It was to see the justice system really at work. We had an attorney general or a lawyer from the DOJ office there arguing in support of us from the administration, which was very helpful. But just to watch, PETA protesters, animal rights, the different ones that were there and arguing the welfare of the animals. And as a producer, my moral values is I want to take care of that animal. I want to treat them right and do what's best for them. And I mentioned earlier, I grew up raising pigs outside, growing and having sows in pens indoors. And anytime you get more than 3 or 4 animals together, they're going to fight. So by housing them individually, we feel like it's better for the animals and we can better care for them. So that I'm going to stop. We're running out of time.
No, that was excellent. Okay, be thinking, because I'm getting ready to open it up for questions. Again, if you're online, please make sure to hit the chat box and enter your question. I've got one more question, though, before I completely open it up, because I think it's an important perspective to gather. You know, we talked about the state moving the needle for small meat processors, providing more opportunity for farmers, ranchers, small business owners, and ultimately Missouri consumers. But there are also challenges with it, Chris. I mean, you've talked a little bit about you're still developing your consumer base and you have options, but you have some challenges that large-scale processors don't necessarily have because of economies of scale, opportunities for byproduct or value-added opportunities for byproducts. So talk a little bit about what you've learned, because I think it's important to see that perspective, just like what Lorin has highlighted the other side on specialty crops.
Okay, I'll get right at it because I see we're running out of time. So one of the big problems that we experienced right off the bat was the offal. All the remaining products after we harvest the meat. Big operations are capable of using that and retrieving some income off of it, whether it be through pet food or other specialty products. The thing about a small plant like what the governor and everybody was wanting is a lot of our product is not inspected because it's custom. It could be any one of these customers out there that brings their animals to us to have it slaughtered and processed. If that offal off that animal, it's still my responsibility to get rid of it, but I really can't do anything with it. I mean, there's no organs we can use. There's no, there is no market in this part of the world, to my knowledge, because of regulation for a hide. You can't give a hide away. If somebody wants hides, come down. I'll give them to you. I probably have to get a permit to do that, though, to be honest with you. But that's another thing. You got, we even had to get permits even to harvest organs to give to the local school to use for reproductive tracts. We can't just give them organs. We had to have a permit to give that to the ag teacher for the ag classes. Yeah, but one way or another, so what we're looking into is ulterior methods. We haven't figured out any way to use any of this offal in order to be beneficial to us financially, so we're looking at it in a different pictures. How can we use this to benefit something else? Currently, when we started out with an incinerator. And quickly learned that we couldn't begin to keep up. Number one, it burns diesel fuel. We know that diesel fuel is at $5 a gallon. It's not sustainable. It leaves a big carbon footprint. We're right next to a marijuana growing facility, and believe me, they were bent out of shape all the time when they'd see smoke coming out of this thing. We're in an industrial plant. I guess we were going to ruin their dope. Anyway, long story short,
It's getting wound up, folks.
We went ahead and the incinerator didn't work. So we've been hauling to a solid waste landfill, which I also had to have a special permit for in order to move down the highway. Again, it's a waste. It's being buried. It's doing no one any good. So we're partnering up right now with a company that you're aware of. It's called Renaissance Ag. And they're trying to find solutions, and they have already dealt with this in small to intermediate facilities out throughout the West, where when we talked to them, they said, consider yourself lucky. You have a landfill. A lot of places in Colorado or more of these remote areas, they don't have a place in order to even haul it. So we're looking into, it's a system that basically will use larvae and it will convert these products into nutrients for fertilizer or actually high protein animal feeds. And it's done in their building. So we're getting the 1 minute over here. I'd be happy to answer any questions over that, but if that's my daughter, so if I'm the one who runs over, I'm in trouble.
Okay, if we haven't given you enough to stir thought and conversation, then I haven't done my job as the moderator. So Brundick Leroy is going to come up here, and she's going to help me facilitate the online chat. But first, let me take it out to the in-person audience. Who has a question? Oh, man. Emily, do we have anything in the chat box?
We do. We have several questions, so we're going to jump right in. So a question about succession farming. They want to know your thoughts on passing down to next generation, best practices. Is there interest? Go.
Can I tell you what not to do? No, I'm kidding.
Todd, let's start with you, because Donnie is back home on the farm.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to have our son back on the farm working with us. And that is a challenge with any family farm. To set up, you set up an LLC, how do you do things? You sell them part of that, sell them shares in something. So I think everybody has discuss that amongst their family. What's the best way? At what point does grandma or grandpa maybe want to be backing out of it, or mom or dad as they get older? How do you give up some of yours ownership to your children, but yet they want to have skin in the game, they want to be a part of it. So it's important that we find that way, whether we talk to professionals that can help advise us how to do that, but it's have that transition in place to move to that. So we're kind of working on that now with our family, but it's a challenge, to make it fair and equitable, but yet give them an opportunity, because if we don't give them that opportunity, they eventually they just, I love doing this, but I got to have more than just, hey, I got a few cows or a few pigs. Really give them a part of it to help make those decisions.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to skip you just for a second. Austin will have the perspective of you're probably starting to maybe try to push mom and dad to have some conversation, right, about what the future looks like. Then I'm going to come back to you.
That is very true. Really, right now, I think looking at it, I want to be a part of it, but more where I'm at is I'm just helping make decisions for the future, because I know it's going to be mine eventually, and how it's going to be split between my brother and I. So giving us the opportunity to have input that's going to affect us in the future.
All right, Chris.
I just think that we need to remember everybody wants to be able to do this for their children and their future generations, but it's really a big struggle to make certain that you're not passing a burden along. In some cases, I mean, these things don't always cash flow like you wish they would, and you better have a really good plan, because it can be as bad a plan as it can be as good a plan.
Lorin, any?
I completely agree. Our kids, when we bought the farm from my mother and father-in-law, our kids are a part of the business. Their name is on the LLC, their name is on the property, because of death tax and all of those kinds of things. We have been thinking about this. I mean, that's just a part of it, and because we don't want to pass a burden on to our children. But we also are trying to, like I mentioned, we're trying to create a healthy business that they want to take over, but at the same time trying to market and brand ourselves that if for some reason one day they don't want to, we have something that's marketable to then be able to sell. So then that way they can be set up in a different way if it's not through ownership of the farm.
Dave Baker, do you have a question?
Well, I guess here's an opportunity to have a conversation a little bit. Extension and farmers and Farm Bureau and commodity groups have been very instrumental in this stage of moving us forward as an industry. You've got 4 different perspectives up there. You look at it. Where and how do you see the role of extension moving forward, and what we ought to be doing to develop a comprehensive approach to agriculture in this state? Because we've got a diverse state. We've got everything that you're talking about in the country. How do we build? What do you guys see as the future?
Okay, so if you couldn't quite hear Dave, he did a great job up front of reiterating that strong connection between extension and that bond between Farm Bureau, our commodity groups, and everyone working to move the state forward. But coming back to pitch to the panel, what would you like to see from extension as you look ahead? So who wants to start?
Okay, I will. So thank you for that question, Dave. Good question. Here's my thoughts on this. I see a lot of really good things come out of extension, and I see a lot of programs that are very well suited for smaller entrepreneurial growers and stuff. But where I'd like to see extension move is in the bigger picture. By that I mean pushing the programs, or not necessarily programs, but pushing the education that all of agriculture is necessary. Todd over here raises hogs differently than we raise hogs. Todd's a commercial producer. Todd raises his in confinement. I do not. I am semi-confined, but I am nowhere near what Todd is. I raise a specialty product that some consumers want. I think that's important. He feeds the world. I feed some people. I think that extension needs to recognize we need to support the big agriculture that is struggling a lot of times with negative public opinion, and have the system support that better to show that all of agriculture is necessary, not just in Missouri, but in the whole United States.
I agree with Chris completely, and I should back up and say, I believe that nobody has to raise pigs like I do. We need all types of production. I truly believe that, and I will, as long as you've got a market, you've got a way of doing it, I'm all for it, and I support what Chris does and many others. I believe there's opportunity for extension in a lot of ways. We talk about education, informing the consumers, helping get our message out, what we're doing, regardless of how it's being done. Helping with some of the technical things sometimes we're doing with our farms, or some of the regulations we got to deal with. You know, we're having to go out and hire folks to help explain this or do documentation and things. So there's so much things that are being done that we're required to do all the time that we need more assistance on or explanation. And younger people got the technology part of it, but we got to continue integrating that all the time in any part of our business.
You know, it's interesting to, don't raise your eyebrows at me, Garret.
Oh, no. Like, where's she going to go?
So as, you know, I love Extension, and I worked for Extension for many, many years. And, you know, it became hard for, you know, my husband in particular, who runs our business on the day in, day out. It's kind of like it takes all types, right? But within the specialty crop area, we need a seat at that table with commodity groups. Like, so we've, you know, the word commodity groups have really been mentioned a lot. Raising direct to consumable foods, that's a serious business. We are not just truck gardeners. We are farmers just the same. We just do it differently, right? So one of the things that I think that Extension could really do is to help elevate, you know, these larger direct consumable farmers and help get us a seat at that table. Because if we're going to work in a holistic approach, if we're looking at ways to, you know, have more value added product, to work more, you know, we need people like Todd, because we could use his fertilizer, you know, on our property. We have to run in that same circle. It can't just be the same people at the table at the same time, because we have to have more of that outside perspective into those conversations. And I really think that Farm Bureau and Extension can help lead that conversation.
So I would also like to add on to, it's not a cookie cutter approach. Each operation is totally different. The biggest thing that I think any producer has an issue with is how we market our product. You know, one farmer may be raising, let's say Milo, it's non-GMO, but when you go to the consumer, it's just Milo. They don't know the difference. Or they say non-GMO, it's an extra little premium, but it's just part of the grain. So just helping the producers figure out how to market what they have.
Okay, some really good thought. Dave, thank you for that question. Emily, you want to go back to online?
We do have one more online question, and it's about direct market. So they're saying, we know that there was an increase in demand for local produce and meat during the pandemic. Do you see that continuing as we transition out into whatever new is?
So that's been a really interesting shift to watch in our business. During the pandemic, we couldn't keep up with consumers coming to our market. And consumer trends have gone back to the convenience, right? Again, it goes back to local food is sexy when it's convenient, but then as soon as, you know, your son is playing Little League football and you've got a dance class across town, you know, it's much easier to swing into Hy-Vee to pick up a grocery order versus going in and continuing to shop at a farmer's market or a local farm, you know, farm market like ours. So your die-hard, true seasonal, local buyers, they are your ride or dies. They're going to stick with it. But your average consumer who does not have a direct connect to the producer, to the land, they're going to go directly to where it's easy. And that's been a real challenge for us, because we've had to really think about how we spin our marketing and how we reach different types of customers to continue building on that base.
So I will add that if you go to like the Columbia Farmers Market, it really peaked up in COVID whenever COVID hit, and it has continued. It keeps going up. And the main reason I see it keep going up is because as a producer, we're not raising our prices like the grocery store are.
Yeah.
For example, my eggs, if I'm selling them for $3, right now if you buy them off the truck, they're $6+. So the consumers are seeing that the local producers are cheaper, so they're wanting to buy more local just because of the price factor.
They used to say that we were expensive, and we have fought and fought not to raise any of our prices. And even our tagline for our fall festival is affordable family fun, to get them to the farm. But it's not about, just the experience. It's about if we can get them to step into the store and see that our tomatoes are cheaper than what they can buy at the grocery store, we're hoping to then have them hooked on all of our products across the board. That's a good point.
I think, and just one example I had, and I don't direct market to anybody, but I did a story with a reporter out of St. Louis during the height of the pandemic when the meat shelves were pretty low in the grocery stores, and she's like, well, you got all these pigs, can I just come out and get some pork from you? I'm like, no, I don't sell pork, I sell pigs. So I had to explain to the reporter, who was a young mother, because I could hear a child in the background, that there's a pig farm, and then there's processing, and then there's pork you buy. But she had not, the light bulb finally went off, but there's some education in that regard for people to understand what we do on our farms.
I don't mean to disagree with Lorin in any way, but I think that on the meat side of things, that I definitely see this consumer trend remaining after the pandemic. I've taken phone calls with more people that said, just as soon as I get a deep freeze, just as soon as I get a deep freeze. And we filled a lot of those up, and these are repeat customers. I think that the pandemic created an opportunity for people that when they decided two things. Number one, I think there's a lot of scared people out there right now with the entire way that the economy is, and they feel secure with having meat in their freezer. Once they experience the difference, the quality, they want to come back. When it comes to meat, it's not as perishable as your product is, and I understand that. I mean, I know that a lot of your stuff can be frozen, but it's not as good once it's froze. When they pick up our product, it's already froze. But it's not maybe as old as some of the other supply chain. So do I see it continuing in my business? Yes.
Folks, we're out of time. Help me in thanking these 4 wonderful panelists for their perspectives. Yesterday evening, we had the chance to talk about why Missouri is the place to be, and the collective efforts through the Food and Beverage Manufacturing Initiative, an unprecedented effort, I might add, to create economic opportunity for these individuals, their families, but truly those who are going to follow us in production agriculture, as well as positions within the supply chain. I could not be more excited about the future of Missouri agriculture. And what you heard today are diverse perspectives that span the spectrum of production ag in the state. You heard real-world challenges, but what you also heard are 4 people who love what they do. They love caring for the land, they love caring for their animals, they love raising their family in this environment. And what we really didn't get to touch on are their contributions to their community, both directly and indirectly. But takeaways today, all of these folks are taking risks, and they're doing it for the right reasons, because ultimately they're a part of our collective effort to do more and to feed more people all across the state and country. So it truly is, I am blessed to be a farmer and to be a part of the organization that we know of Farm Bureau, and so proud to sit on this stage with these 4 today. And thank you for what you do, for helping amplify the voice. I know some of you are farmers and ranchers yourself, but thank you for what you do to tell the story in your communities and to lift up your farm and ranch families. So thank you, and Dr. Stewart, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of All Things Food.
Well, let's give them a great round of applause. Wonderful panel. And I always think it's neat when you can bring it back home. We had some national, global thought leaders yesterday morning, but when you think about this is real Missouri. I didn't say rural, I said real. This is real Missouri, happening in real time. And one of the things that my takeaways today is something I was really glad you guys said. You always sit there when you're like me and you think about, man, if I wonder if they're going to say this, but to hear them talk about that there's room at the table for everybody, whether you be on the small end, the locally grown, the direct to consumer, or those that feed the world, there's room for everybody. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday, and I want to say this again, we are going to be launching a new position to deal in the food system. It'll be a position that in MU Extension, also partnered with Lincoln University. And you'll see that hit the street sometime in November. And it's to really begin to bring together this segment that we're talking about, direct to consumer, to figure that out even more, work with Bill McKelvey and the team that we already have assembled, but to really build off of that work. And I'm excited about that because I think that's something that's really needed in this space. In my history of before I came here, we were really active in that space as well as big ag because we had it all under a big umbrella. We had everybody from the local grower that you think about, the smaller operator perhaps, but quite frankly, some of them are making huge profits. Small does not mean that you're not making a lot of money. It just means your scale is different or your approach is different, but you're meeting consumer needs. And I think that's the key to this. I had a friend of mine who worked in that space for a long time in the past, and he said, when you get right down to it, if there's a consumer that wants to buy, and he always used watermelons, he said, you know, if somebody wants to buy a watermelon grown this way and they want to pay $1 a piece, that's fine. If you've got a market for that, you can make money at that, fine. But if somebody wants to pay $10 a watermelon because we grow it this way, grow them the $10 watermelon. He said it's all about consumer. Drive it to where they are and figure that out. So again, let's thank Garret and this entire team. Great job today. Wonderful job. Thank you.